Good morning. Calling to order the regular weekly open meeting of the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission for Wednesday, March 29th, 2023. Michael, could you call the roll?
Commissioner Aguilera, present. Commissioner Ellison, present. Commissioner O'Connell,
Present.
we have 3 commissioners. That constitutes a quorum.
Okay, so next item is Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. The flag of the state of New Mexico, with the symbol of perfect friendships among the united cultures.
Okay, so we have a fairly brief agenda this morning, but commissioners, do you have any changes to the agenda?
The only change I might suggest is I just had a comment or two to make on the utility matter, the Lee County Electric Cooperative. So we might move that to the regular part just to have a comment or two on that.
Okay. And then I also just kind of wanted to talk through the item for case 22-00094 TR. So I would move that we move those 2 cases to the regular action items 22-0094 and 23-0034.
I second that motion and also will have comments on 22-00094.
Any discussion? Okay, so seeing no dissent, we're gonna revise the agenda to remove 2 items from consent and move them to regular action. And those 2 items are case 22-0094 and 23-0034. So Erica, Hans gets to talk too. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Feels like we might have some in the room here, but Hans, is there anyone signed up?
Yes, Chairman. There should be a couple individuals in person, and there are a couple people that wish to make comment via Zoom as well. Let me go ahead and take care of the in-person people first. I should, and apologies for mispronunciation of any names. I should have Athena Christodoulou and Muriel Carpenter in person there in the hearing room. So if Athena or Muriel want to make their comments, please move forward to the front of the room to make your comment. Please be reminded that the commission reserves the right to limit comments to 3 minutes.
Okay, so you can go ahead and sit down and then push the button so the little red light becomes green and Zoom land can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners, and welcome PRC commissioners. My name is Athena Christodoulou. I'm a retired Navy commander and energy and environmental engineer and tech entrepreneur, but most importantly, a grandmother. As a 20-year+ resident of Albuquerque, I've engaged in the electric arena for almost a decade now. The last time I spoke on the PNM Avangrid merger, I looked at several things. I looked at the gender balance in leadership and their environmental records, and kudos to them, they've improved it. The third item was the tech focus. And so this time I'm going to focus on that same one because it is dealing with the issue facing humanity, the biggest issue facing humanity, and addiction. And just a reminder on what addiction is when your mind tells you shouldn't do something, when your mouth may tell everybody you're not going to do something, but your actions speak differently, that you do it, okay? And of course, I'm hoping all three of you realize that the biggest issue I'm talking about is climate change. And being the true engineer, scientist, I have handouts with wonderful graphs that all three of you will appreciate, which I'm going to hold off until afterwards because don't want you to look at them quite yet. On the first graph, what you're going to see, climate change, we have a problem. And the first graph talks about the carbon dioxide emissions from New Mexico, and you'll see that electric generation comprises a huge part of it. The second is, what is the solution? We have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, right? And we have to do it fast. The sixth assessment came out and it's dire. We have to reduce them immediately. And that includes methane, which is not 84 times worse than carbon dioxide, because that's over a 20-year period. But you're talking more in a shorter period of 150 to 200 times, because it's only around mostly for 13 years. And the third graph talks about the journey being as important as the destination. Yes, we need to reduce 30%, to 50% of our greenhouse gases by 2030, and so on. But it's how we get there that matters as much. And then also talk about life cycle greenhouse gases. When we get a lot of hype about hydrogen, in that it is a green gas, it's only green if it's made green. I used to be on a research group for hydrogen fuel cells. Clean hydrogen is the problem. It is the problem that we're being distracted with, which as recently as March 3rd, to the Connecticut legislature, Avangrid spoke of support for clean hydrogen. You see, in other places in the country, they own not just an electrical grid, electrical utility, there's also gas involved. And that's the problem. When you have two very strong forces, we have to electrify very quickly, and we can't get distracted with hydrogen that is from fracking. In other words, from methane. So anytime you hear an electric utility wanting to hold on to their turbines because we're going to put nice clean hydrogen in there, don't believe it. All right. So I oppose this Avangrid merger because I see an addiction that Avangrid has, that this state is also prone to. I spent the last 60 days fighting with the fossil fuel industry, trying to get combined cycle natural gas turbines counted as renewable energy. As fighting, just, hey, we can just put all that carbon dioxide in the ground and we're okay.
Thank you.
To make sure that
please conclude your commentary.
Much.
What you say is
I'm done.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I want to encourage you. I sat in on the IRP process yesterday, the beginning of it for PNM. It is a good process. Don't gum up the works with trying to do a merger with a company that's going to engulf and keep us from being the heroes that New Mexico can be. And that's it. That's all. Once I lose my flow, that's it. I'm an engineer. Thank you, though.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Can I approach you?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Muriel Carpenter, and I do appreciate this opportunity to speak before you. I'm a 25-year resident of Albuquerque and a retired lawyer and educator. Being in my retirement, I've been striving to understand how we capitalize on the nearly constant sunshine and intermittent strong wind power of our state to move as quickly as possible away from reliance on fossil fuels while ameliorating the poverty of so many of our citizens. And giving us access to the energy that we produce here, not transmitting it to California. Let's keep it here for our use, at least part of it. The Avangrid purchase is frightening to me. With numbers of locally owned and run renewable energy entrepreneurs vying to get a share of the action, why are we thinking of quashing their opportunities in favor of a foreign giant? I understand that Avangrid aims not only to transmit power, but also to utilize electricity produced by its subsidiaries. In other words, it wants to be a monster monopoly in control of renewably obtained electricity from the solar cell to the home heating unit. Never have I heard in my study of history that such a monopoly ever helped customers. And to add insult to injury, I understand that Avangrid is still enamored of producing electricity through hydrogen. New Mexicans have said no to hydrogen and its hideous downsides at least twice, and that's still no. You know, historically, U.S. corporations weren't judged only by how much they profits they handed to their shareholders. In my day, they prided themselves on the values of the products and services that they could provide. Now, a corporation like Avangrid, wouldn't it be great if it used its financial power and its brain power to do some real good? Could it work with P&M to come up with a profit structure linked to the satisfaction of its customers? Maybe linked to the efficient modernization of the grid, linked to some real strides it could make with us to fight the climate crisis. If so, more power to Avangrid, pun intended. A valuable resource to me in giving me these kinds of ideas came from the EPA. And I don't know if you've had a chance to review it, but it put out a guide to electric utility regulating and financial incentives. So in other words, I should say that better. It's a guide to electric utility regulating and financial incentives, and the kind of financial incentives I was just talking about. It doesn't always have to be just, based on how much money they give to their shareholders. We can work with them to come up with some incentives where they can be profitable, or any corporation can be profitable, but we still get what we want. We get increased customer satisfaction, or a number of other ways that we could measure to give them profits. So, other states have done it. Let's look at it. Hawaii's done it. Illinois.
Please conclude your commentary. Thank you.
So, I just think I think you can do it. You're experts in the field. You can look at the big picture here and help us out. But one more thing I want to say as a fire attorney. If we deal with any foreign corporation, please, please, please make New Mexico be the only place for jurisdiction of any kind of legal issues, and have a local service agent. So right now, as it stands, I oppose the merger. But as I said, let's look at this from a broader perspective and see maybe if we could make it work with this corporation or another corporation. But we have to always keep in mind the people and the planet as our bottom line, power sources. So thank you, folks. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next for public commentary, let me just scan who is participating on Zoom. Chris Wilcox, who I see is on here. Chris, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Chairman and Commissioners, I am Christopher Wilcox, and I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm a low-income father to an infant struggling in the South Valley to make ends meet. In the beginning of the pandemic, I was forced to make a choice between paying my P&M or putting food on the table. I chose the food. Luckily, P&M had mercy on me. They were connected during the pandemic. I could easily reach them, and they've always been responsive to me. This is not to say I agree with their continual rate hikes, excessive fees, and other capitalistic motives, but they are here. They know our plight, they are our community, and understand our culture. The potential merger of P&M to Avangrid is beyond scary for several reasons, which I lay out in bullets because I'm not a good public speaker. Avangrid is a company based out of Spain. SEC filings show Avangrid is partially owned by a company named Iberdrola, holding at least 81.5% of Avangrid, and the oil country of Qatar owns the next largest share of Avangrid. Blackstone, a hedge fund, owns 70% of Iberdrola and is one of the most prolific violators of consumer rights. All of these outside, nefarious, non-New Mexican, less than opaque companies should scare us. I say this because why are we telling New Mexicans we want to support and grow local economy, jobs, and capital? We are inviting, again, a non-New Mexican company owned by Wall Street hedge fund, Qatar, Spain, and others to come take our electricity. This sends New Mexican money out of the country, not just to Wall Street, but out of the USA. Avangrid has numerous lawsuits they've lost in other states and around the country for abuses against their consumers. This is not transition to building New Mexico economies, jobs, and investment. This is outsourcing. In addition, Avangrid is known to fund anti-renewables in the states and countries they hold monopolies in. New Mexico's energy, where we have more sunny days than not, should be ran and focused with the primary beneficiaries being New Mexico development, environmental health, and consumer-centered safety, and transitioned to our globe's sustainable needs. Finally, Avangrid is not the direction New Mexico should be going. Rather, we should be moving towards local renewables, ran by communities and governed by our local, tribal, municipal, and state leaders. For these and many more reasons, namely, this matter was already settled that the citizens of New Mexico do not want Avangrid. I humbly ask you to vote no on the exploitative merger that falls on working families like mine. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Chris. Next, I have Layla Atala, who I do see is joined on Zoom. Layla, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. And good morning, commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Layla. I'm a Santa Fe County resident. My family and I are P&M customers. And I'm also calling in to voice concerns about the proposed P&M Avangrid merger. New Mexico needs affordable, reliable, and clean electricity. And Avangrid's track record does not indicate that the P&M Avangrid merger would move us towards those goals. First, energy is already unaffordable for many New Mexicans. Although the energy burden for the whole state as an average is 3%, it's double that in many communities and even higher for low-income households. The lowest income New Mexicans face an average energy burden of 16%. This winter, customers of Avangrid subsidiaries in Connecticut and New York faced high bills and proposed rate hikes that have prompted legislative action and protests. Please don't bring additional risk of these higher rates to New Mexico. Second, Avangrid's track record and that of its subsidiaries in Scotland, New York, Maine, Connecticut, and Massachusetts shows a history of poor customer service with billing problems, disconnecting customers even during the pandemic, garnishing wages, and harassing customers for debts that they don't actually owe. Again, please do not bring these problems to New Mexico. Finally, as other speakers have noted, we need to be making a rapid transition to renewable energy, taking advantage of New Mexico's plentiful wind and sunshine. However, Avangrid has shown in states like New York and Connecticut that it's willing to spend millions of dollars to lobby against climate legislation, and slow walk that transition to renewable energy. So in conclusion, I urge you to please protect New Mexico ratepayers from these issues and help us continue to make that transition to renewables and uphold the prior decision. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Leila. I have Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I have two other people that had indicated they wanted to make public comment, but I am not seeing them on the participant list for this Zoom call. So I will just briefly call out, just in case I'm missing anything. Diane Maugan, Maughan, or Alex Applegate. If either of you are joined, which I am not seeing a name for either of those. That looks, I'm hearing no response. If there is no one else in the hearing room that showed up to make public comment has concluded for this meeting, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. So the next item on the agenda is a recitation.
Microphone, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a recitation, and I'm going to ask Michael Smith to handle that item.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the minutes for today's meeting should reflect, in accordance with section 1015(1)J, that the Commission's executive closed session meeting that was conducted on March 24th, 2023, addressed New Mexico Supreme Court case S1 SC 39138, Public Service Company of New Mexico versus New Mexico Public Regulation Commission et al. That is NMPRC case 21-00017 UT, otherwise known as the Four Corners Abandonment case. And the minutes should reflected that no other items were discussed in that closed session other than that case.
Thank you. So next is our consent action items. So again, I'll ask Michael Smith just to read off the captions of the two cases that remain on the consent agenda.
Sorry, I'm just scrolling down here. Consent action items for this agenda consist of transportation matters, and those are cases 23-00061 TRM in the matter of the application of City of Albuquerque DBA Albuquerque Fire Rescue for reissuance of certificate number 56834 to provide ambulance service. That's a proposed order on the application. And case 23-00100 TRM in the matter of the application of Hidalgo County DBA Hidalgo County Ambulance Service for reissuance of certificate number 14017 and temporary authority to provide ambulance service. That's a proposed order on the application for temporary authority.
Thank you. Commissioners, any discussion on the consent?
I have no discussion.
No. Yeah, I move that we approve the proposed orders in the consent action agenda.
I second your motion, the two orders.
Mr. Smith, could you take the roll?
Commissioner Aguilera.
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
The consent action items are approved by a vote of 3-0.
Okay, so just in the concept of efficiency, I think we'll take the 23-0034 UT matter first, so that way you only have to get ones. So, Mr. Mueller, are you ready to discuss that? And then I'll guess start with Commissioner Ellison, since you said there were a few items you wanted to discuss. If you could take the lead on that.
Sure, I guess, I just wanted to point out here that Lee County Electric Cooperative was previously using a 6-month levelized methodology for their fuel and power purchase adjustment. So they would change that adjustment item in the bill every 6 months. And what they're proposing to do now is to go to a 6-month rolling average, such that in each month, the adjustment clause will change based on the rolling average of the previous 6 months. And I think Mr. Mueller can talk more about this, but that seems to be a trend amongst electric cooperatives to move towards that 6-month rolling average methodology. And it seems to me to be a good idea because I think it is going to tend to limit the variability in that charge when you are looking back over the last 6 months. So I just wanted to call that out and say that personally, I think that that's a good idea.
Thank you. Do you have any questions or discussion on that?
No.
So I guess entertain a motion to approve the order in that case.
I would
Move to approve the order.
I'll second. So we have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
motion carries 3-0.
Thanks. So next item will be case 22-00094 TR with a presentation from Ms. Stefanes.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. So I actually worked with Attorney Hans on this one, so I'd like to defer to him on this presentation, if you wouldn't mind.
Great. Well, and then I'll go ahead and take the lead on that because I was the one that pulled it off the consent agenda, or at least was the first to speak up on that. And it's an interesting case because my understanding of it, and this is where I think you'll be invaluable, Hans, but this was an order that was on the consent agenda back in May of 2022. It got approved on consent back in May of 2022. And then we have utility division or transportation division staff asking for us to clarify the order. So when I went back and read the documents, I think I understand what the clarification is, why they're asking for a clarification, because despite the fact that the caption of the case says it's for amendments to certificate and tariff, and the recommendation in the record, the unopposed recommendation is for an amendment to certificate and tariff. The order only says certificate, it never says tariff. So could you confirm if that's the issue that staff saw and is requesting our clarification on?
That is correct, Mr. Chair. Back in May, there was some confusion between, I would say, myself and staff as to who was actually approving the tariff. There were some tariffs that staff would handle independently. So that when the order was processed, it was just for the certificate. Staff had asked me recently for essentially making an errata to that order, but I felt that it had exceeded the time for an errata to be made. I typically consider an errata only appropriate probably within a week of the order being filed. So in lieu of an errata, since we are multiple months or close to a year away from the order, I felt it was more appropriate that an order for clarification be made, intending to show that as you stated, the recommendation was for both the certificate and the tariff. and was simply overlooked in the order. So we have asked staff to file the official request for that clarification on the record. So my recommendation would be to table this matter until the next meeting, and we will have that request for clarification from staff, and we can bring this proposed order for clarification back to the commission at that time.
I appreciate that explanation. Commissioners, do you have any discussion or questions on this one?
Yeah, I actually was gonna move to strike this item. Because as you mentioned, it is a clarification that is made sua sponte because there is no formal question raised on the record. And while I'm almost positive this question would not be controversial, I do think it is important to have a question on the record so that all the parties have an opportunity to weigh in or agree or disagree. And so I appreciate the explanation that that you just gave, Mr. Mueller, about asking staff to file something formally in the record. I would say that I still think maybe next week would be premature, because if they file something there, we still need to allow time for comments. So, and I don't think we're, unless the comment period is shortened, which I'm not sure there is, I don't know, maybe there's basis for that, but so I won't prejudge that, but I think next week might still be too early.
I appreciate the concern, Commissioner. I mean, I can state there were no interveners or objections to the original certificate, so the only parties would be the party and staff. So I would not anticipate any party objection to that, but I will be happy to bring it back when you are comfortable with it. Beyond, we can wait the additional period.
Sorry, and Mr. Mueller, just to confirm, this all came about because of an omission in the original order. Is that correct?
That is correct, Commissioner Allison. As I indicated, I think back then there were some tariffs that staff was handling independently. I thought this fell under that umbrella that would be handled independently by staff, not through commission order. But so it was simply an oversight that the recommended decision asked commission approval for both the certificate and the tariff in this matter.
I see. So it didn't have to ask for commission approval since the tariff was being set independently. Is that what you're saying?
I believe that was my understanding at the time. I was simply used to bringing only ambulatory tariffs before the commission, and there were other tariff categories that were being handled independently by staff. So I simply thought that this was going to be a certificate only recommendation, but indeed the recommended decision did ask for commission approval on the tariff. So I just need to correct that oversight.
I see. Thank you. Is the proposal then to table this item? Is that what?
Yeah, I'd say based on the discussion, that's where we're headed, is a motion to table. There hasn't been one yet, but.
Well, I don't know if it's a motion to table, because this order is responding to an informal question. So I think a formal question in the record would first need to come in, and then we would need to respond to that. So I think, I don't know if Michael, you disagree, but I think I would make a motion to strike this until we have a formal filing to respond to.
Chairman, Commissioners, I think the commission could. I think the matter is still open, so I think the issue of whether the commission's final order properly addressed all the issues that were at issue. I'm repeating myself there, but in the case, in its order that it granted in May, is the issue that's in front of the commission, less so than the specific order that's in front of the commission. So I think a tabling motion would be appropriate as in this case.
Well, just in the concept, I thought it'd be great to have a discussion here because first of all, just going in, I believe in what I was taught in driver's ed is learn from your near misses so you don't get into crashes, right? So this is a great example of that. And then when I went to eDocket, it says that the case is closed. So I guess if you could explain to me what the difference between the matter being open and eDocket saying the case is closed. Because I heard what Commissioner Aguilar was saying about motion to strike. I just want to understand the difference between a table and a strike. And if the docket's closed, it kind of feels like strike is the right word.
Well, I get, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the issue, I guess the issue is this was being brought as a motion on the commission, essentially on the commission's own motion to correct an error that has been perceived in what the commission ordered. So it would be to reopen the docket. The commission's, authority is that it has the ability to reopen matter at any time to correct an error of that nature. So in that sense, that's what should really be part of this. It should state that we're reopening the matter to issue an order.
Thanks for that. I guess I will leave it up to Commissioner Aguilera what motion to make here.
Okay, so I will make a motion to strike this because I don't think we are approving an order here or starting an order here on our own motion. I think that's kind of my point, is that I think the parties should file a motion. So I would move to strike this item from the agenda. If there is a formal motion that is filed at some point, I think we can, that could reopen the record.
And just a point of clarification, who would file that? Would it be staff or would it be the company itself?
I think either. Either could. It seems like staff here is the one who is intending to file something. I think, and they were, as Mr. Mueller mentioned, they were the only two parties.
Okay, so I'll second the commissioner's motion and then just offer one more item of discussion before we vote. Is the reason I wanted to talk about this is it just for me highlights the importance of writing good orders. I think you mentioned at a previous meeting that the commission speaks through its orders. And so this is one where it was on consent agenda, it probably didn't get much attention. And I appreciate that staff asked for the clarification. I think what all we're doing is asking for, let's follow the process. But it just goes to show that even the orders that are on consent agendas in uncontested cases, we need to take care to make sure they're written carefully and convey what our meaning is. So is there any further discussion on this or are we ready to vote?
I'm ready to vote.
Yeah, not seeing any more discussion. Since it's a regular agenda item, I'll ask you to call the roll on our motion to strike here.
Was there, I'm sorry, I missed, was there a second on that motion?
I seconded.
Okay. I just want to make sure. Okay. Commissioner Aguilera.
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison. Aye. Commissioner O'Connell.
I
Motion carries with a vote of 3-0.
thank you. And thank you to staff also for helping us learn something. Okay, so next item on the agenda is transportation, or it's utility matter. A number of formal complaints. So I'm gonna turn it over to Ms. Stefanis to do the presentation on that item.
Good morning, commissioners. So I am here to propose to present on an order and an alternative order in response to 5 formal complaints filed by Odell Electrical Services LLC against PNM. And it's not often that formal complaints are presented in front of the commission on the regular agenda item, but given the number of complaints, we thought that it'd be important to brief the commission on the record. And before I discuss the orders and the orders, I wanted to give a quick summary of the allegations of each complaint. On February 7th, 2023, Odell filed a formal complaint into case number 23-0043 UT, alleging that PNM has not responded to requests to disconnect the temporary power provided to a consumer in Sandia Pueblo. That same day, Odell filed a formal complaint into case number 23-00044 UT, alleging that improper record keeping caused delay to the energization of a project in Placitas. On February 20th, 2023, Odell filed a formal complaint into case number 23-00063 UT, alleging that a yard line had not been installed in an Albuquerque project. On March 6th, Odell filed a formal complaint into case number 23-00078 UT, alleging that there was a delay in energization to a project in the village of Los Ranchos. And on March 6th, they filed a formal complaint into case number 23-00079 UT, alleging that PNM agents were offering to pay Odell to withdraw from the complaints. Now we can turn to the proposed order. So the original order requires 3 things. It requires Odell to retain counsel. It requires Odell to amend the formal complaints, and it consolidates the 5 formal complaints into one docket. And if Odell doesn't retain counsel or submit the formal complaints by the proposed deadline, which would be 30 days from today, it allows for the commission to dismiss the case. The reasons for requiring Odell to retain counsel. Commission rules require that individuals other than attorneys, or excuse me, entities other than individuals be represented by an attorney in formal proceedings. And I want to emphasize the entities other than individuals. Individual consumers can still file for complaints. And the commission has allowed for a waiver of the requirement of an attorney for LLCs, but commission cases have held that that should be an exception and not the norm, and it should be considered on a case-to-case basis. As a limited liability company, Odell should be represented by counsel in this formal proceeding. And they haven't demonstrated in their formal complaints that waiver of this case, of this requirement, is appropriate in these cases. And not only do our rules require representation, I actually think it would be in Odell's best interest to retain an attorney so that they can inform them, the attorney can inform Odell of the commission's role and our jurisdiction over which companies, remedies that can be granted. And I think that an attorney can help them better understand what we do. So, and now requiring Odell to amend the formal complaints. So commission rules and procedures require that formal complaints, among other things, include a clear and concise statement of the relief sought, a concise and explicit statement of the facts that are allegedly violations, a statement of any laws and rules that are alleged to have been violated. Right now, the formal complaints don't include those things. But commission rules also allow for the commission to investigate anything within their jurisdiction. And right now, the commission doesn't really want to ignore 5 formal complaints. And the complaints are vague enough to suggest that there might be something there, but asking for an amendment to these complaints to clarify the issues would be a first step for the commission in investigations. Now, as the consolidation of the cases, the commission rules allow for 1 or 2, allow the commission to order 2 or more proceedings involving similar questions of law or facts to be consolidating in public hearing. Now, this isn't really at the public hearing stage and it may not get there, but consolidation might make for administrative efficiency and might help avoid confusion. Right now, there are 5 complaints, same case name, and it may allow for an orderly resolution to occur in a single docket. Now, the alternative order. So the alternative order was drafted after speaking with Commissioner Aguilera, and it does what the first order does in that it requires Odell to retain counsel and allows Odell the opportunity to amend. The substantive difference is that it doesn't consolidate the cases quite yet. As Commissioner Aguilera pointed out, although the formal complaints suggest that there might be a similar issue of delayed services to consumers, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's the same issue of law quite. And until we get an amendment to those complaints to ensure that there's a similar issue of law, it may be inappropriate to consolidate right now. So I will stand for any questions.
Thank you for that presentation, and I think I understand the contrast between the 2 orders. One of the things that I was thinking through when I was preparing for this is just time frame also. I guess my understanding is because these complaints are not written in a way, they're formal complaints, so that's a section of our rule that has special meaning to it. And these complaints weren't written in a way that they can be accepted as formal complaints. The timeframes on a formal complaint haven't really started. Is that a fair opinion to have? Or?
So that is a fair opinion to have, but also our formal complaint rules don't really have very many timelines for the commission to act. They do after the commission provides notice to respondent, then they have 20 days to respond, but for commission action, it doesn't have very many timelines.
Yeah, thank you. Because I mean, what I'm trying to balance is the substance, or what's alleged in these complaints. I think is serious, and so probably isn't served by running all. We have to have a process because they're serious, but we also should act quickly. So those are just the 2 things that I was trying to balance in my head. But I appreciated your explanation for why we should require them to retain counsel. And frankly, I think that's a great first step, and will fix a lot of the other things that are going on with these complaints. So anyway, those are my questions. And commissioners, did you have any other questions?
Ms. Stephans, if we choose not to consolidate these cases now, can we decide to consolidate them at any point in the future?
Yes, we can.
Will having them separate, would it slow down the process, at least initially?
I do not think so. At least all of the orders have the same deadlines for retaining counsel and filing an amendment. And these, as you can tell, the order has all the case captions because it is the same order. It'll just be filed into 5 separate cases as opposed to, into a single docket. So I think that they'll still move now that they have all been identified and included in a single order, I think they'll move together for the most part.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so I can explain a little bit further what I was thinking there. So while they involve the two same parties, Odell and PNM, the service requested in 4 of the complaints may be different and involves different residential customers. And so I think that the questions of law, in fact, might be different. They might be the same, but there's a chance that they might be different. And so I think that once Odell files more information, then we can see which rules they are alleging are being violated and consider whether it's the same rule that's being alleged that's being violated, and I think that information will illuminate whether we should consider consolidating them. I do agree with consolidating, where there are efficiencies and it's in the public interest. I was just thinking, not necessarily that it's not appropriate right now, just that it's premature. And so to answer your question again, Commissioner Ellison, this would only defer that decision to later when we have more information. I do have a couple of questions just to clarify for the record with respect to retaining counsel, and these might be just more like in general, because one thing you mentioned is that Odell hasn't demonstrated that they should get a waiver. I guess my question is, for the record, did they request a waiver?
They did not request a waiver. And the reason I made the statement that it doesn't seem appropriate for them to have a waiver is the commission has there's some commission cases outlining some elements that should be met before granting a waiver, or considerations the commission should look into before granting a waiver. And one of them is knowing the commission rules, and upon review of the formal complaints, doesn't seem like that's the case for Odell right now.
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting issue because I agree with sort of the threshold that you explained for when counsel is required, and just sort of thinking outside of this case a little bit to where it's customer, they would not know necessarily to request a waiver, right? And so I think it would probably be incumbent upon us, probably, staff, to just let them know that you can request a waiver, or do we normally grant that waiver on our own motion, which I could see being appropriate for a customer?
Sure. So customers, individuals do not need an attorney. So LLCs do.
Okay.
And I'm not quite sure whether the waiver is granted on our own motion in practice, what that looks like currently.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. I do understand it better now. So I appreciate that. So I don't have any further questions.
Seeing no further discussion, I will move to adopt the non-consolidated order to amend complaints that has been presented in this case.
I second that motion.
You take a roll, please.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Aye.
Commissioner Ellis.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connor.
Aye.
Motion carries by a vote of 3-0.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Stefanos. Okay, so next agenda item is communications with commissioners. Commissioners, do you have any items to bring up?
I do have an item. One of the outstanding items on our lists of rulemakings that we need to get to is the grid modernization rulemaking. And I would like to volunteer to work on that and to put together an internal working group to draft that proposed rulemaking. As you're aware, back in November, the commission issued a bench request with a number of questions around a potential grid modernization rulemaking, and got responses from the 3 IOUs and the Office of the Attorney General. However, we, have not issued a notice of proposed rulemaking. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. If you're in agreement, I would be happy to put together that internal working group. I was thinking Judith Amer, Ed Rilkoff, Arthur O'Donnell, Mary Jane Parks, and someone from our legal group, perhaps Brad Borman. And Ms. Amer would seek both of your thoughts around what that draft rulemaking should contain, so that those could be taken into account from the start, so that we would hopefully end up with a consensus draft rulemaking.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Grid mod was a notable omission from my list of rule makings that we need to pursue. And then I also agree with you that these rule makings deserve a good team. And the first step is crucially important too, just issuing the notice correctly, because that's how you frame it and get the conversation started. I think is also crucial to getting through a rulemaking in a reasonable time frame with a good result. And then the last point I'd make on that is that, I have no argument at all with the size of the team that you described that we need on that, but that's why I asked Chief of Staff to put these teams together, because I think that list of folks you mentioned are folks that we're probably going to want on several of these rulemakings. So trying to make sure we've got them laid out, prioritized, staged, so that we're not asking the same folks to do a lot of stuff all at once at the expense of the quality of the rulemaking processes. That's exactly why I asked Chief of Staff to coordinate those items.
And I could certainly speak with Ms. Scurry offline about her thoughts as to the composition of that working group, but I mainly just wanted to bring that up and volunteer that I would be willing to to work on this process.
Oh, that's great. And maybe for all of these rulemakings that we should have a commissioner involved. Because like I say, we're responsible for the end of it. So it'd be good to be involved in the beginning. And then, like I say, the first moment I see is really crucial, which is getting a notice put together. that really encompasses what needs to be done and also explains the things that aren't going to be done. Can sometimes be as important. Did you have any comments on that, Chief of Staff?
Would you like me to?
Yeah, please.
Commissioners, I don't have any particular comments as to the proposal Commissioner Ellison just made, except that I agree that we need to be careful about the resources and making all of the same people on all of the same tasks. The other concern that comes to mind is the timing of these, and so the need to prioritize, because not only do we not want to compromise the integrity of the other rulemaking processes that this commission wants to undertake, there's we want to make sure that the rest of the work, all the cases and everything else is moving forward and not compromising that integrity. So we will be collecting a working group to talk about the working group. I feel a little bit like I'm in Spaceballs right now. We're going to prepare, but I think it's an important long view that we need to take going forward, making sure we're pacing ourselves so that we can put out the best product.
You make the case though for why, I see the grid mod rulemaking as being really, I would say it would be my top priority looking at all the rulemakings. We obviously have a couple of grid modernization applications before us. I think the original thought of the commission last year was to request some fairly narrow grid mod applications around advanced metering, and then to have a grid modernization rulemaking to establish ground rules and criteria by which future grid modernization applications would be judged. I think we're seeing now in at least one of the cases where the request goes well beyond the advanced metering and really gets into other areas of grid modernization. And ideally, it would be good to have a rule in place before deciding some of these grid mod cases that establishes what are the goals of grid modernization and, putting it into context with distribution planning in general. And, without those guidelines, I think it's difficult to make judgments as to are the investment plans proposed achieving the desired goals? Because right now there don't seem to be any desired goals. It seems to be, equipment that we want that produces that has these benefits. And I think that's backwards. And I would like to see us really accelerate a grid mod rulemaking so that we have a basis by which to judge these applications.
Commissioners, Commissioner Ellison, I have no problem. We can certainly prioritize grid mod as the first rulemaking that we jump into, but I would warn that we need to be careful about applying rules that are not yet in place to existing dockets. There may be an ex post facto problem.
Yeah, could you explain that a little further? Because my understanding is more black and white, that if the rule that applies to an application are the rules that are in existence when the application's filed.
Commissioners, I don't think I could explain it any better than that.
Yeah, I agree. Grid mod is important and wouldn't be surprised if that sifts to the top of the list. So I guess while you're planning to plan at a future meeting, it sounds like we should have a good discussion on prioritization of, so if you could put together a proposal and bring it back soon.
Yes,
Do you need the pressure of a deadline?
no, I can set my own, thank you.
Okay, I'm learning some folks.
Okay, so
need the
it-
pressure of a deadline, some do not.
So, so the impression I'm getting is it may be a bit early for me to jump in with organizing this working group, that maybe we want to wait a week to get that, to look at the priorities. Is that what I'm hearing?
What I would propose and what I had been looking at is kind of the following steps. Take a comprehensive look at the proposed rules that are on everybody's various lists, because I'm learning that everybody has different lists. Some of them overlap, some of them don't. So once we have a comprehensive look at all of the proposed rules that this commission should consider, at that point, I will work with the division directors and the staff to get volunteers who have special interests in each of those. But I don't think that it's premature for any of your desires to say, I'm interested in this one or that one, because I think that'll help me put together a look at what we're looking at and be able to present to you a better plan.
Okay, great. That makes sense.
Commissioner Ellison, thank you for volunteering to sort of lead that rulemaking. I think that's a good idea, to sort of divide and conquer and have a lead to work. Obviously, all the commissioners will need to be involved at some point and vote on a NOPR or rulemaking. But I think what you propose to sort of have a lead will be very helpful, especially since we only have 3 of us.
Not it, no, joking. So, is there any more you wanted to talk about on the rulemakings? I mean, I really appreciate you bringing that up. I thought this is a very important discussion we just had, so thank you.
That's really all I wanted to bring up. And I did want to ask about the April 12th open meeting. Are we deciding that we won't have the meeting on April the 12th and we'll have it the following Wednesday?
Yeah, that's my assumption, that there will be no open meeting on Wednesday, April 12th. For whatever reason, April is conference month. So I think all 3 of us are planning to be in Nevada for Krebsy YRAB. And I know I have to be there Wednesday morning. So I'm unavailable Wednesday morning. Might be able to do remote with 2 commissioners on that day, but I don't know when you're traveling or if that's even possible. So anyway, my assumption was no meeting on the 12th. Then the following week, there is another conference that is in Santa Fe right here at El Dorado. So a lot of whether we're attending that or not, there will be a lot of people here we should talk to. So that'll be a busy time also. But my assumption was, especially because we're not going to, looks hard to have one on the 12th. My understanding is there aren't any statutory deadlines that dictate we have to have a meeting on the 12th. That we will have one on the 19th, even though we'll probably be signed up to be across the street. So.
I would support that, not having the meeting on April the 12th, as long as we're not going to get into trouble with any statutory deadlines.
And commissioners, I believe we've prepared a notice of non-meeting. I'm not sure is a thing, but we're going to make it a thing. So if that's where we are, we will post that.
Can confirm it's a thing.
It's a notice of cancellation because it's a regularly scheduled meeting.
Yeah, because we're on this open meeting act or policy of every week, we have to notice if we're not going to be, is that what?
Correct.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I mean, just general comment, this is the first meeting we've had like this in the months that we've been together, and to me, we haven't made a lot of votes, but it's been one of the more valuable meetings because it's an opportunity for the three of us to learn stuff together, so anyway. Just throwing that out there.
I did want to ask Commissioner Aguilera if there's any more progress or feedback on the frequency of meetings, on the idea of having the bi-weekly meetings.
Yeah, I think there has been some progress. I think the next step is to so there's an initial draft. I think the next step is to share that more widely with other advisory staff. And Ms. Curry will also help, make sure that that stays on track. And so I guess maybe we can ask you what a reasonable deadline would be. I think we should set a deadline so that for a draft for the three commissioners to look at. I also, since we sort of talked about like taking a lead on something, I am happy to take the lead on this and look at a first draft and provide feedback if you both would be okay with that. So generally what I am thinking is a memo that explains what types of proceedings we have, what statutory dates we have with those proceedings, and can lay out a process as to how meeting every 2 weeks would work. So that includes when memos are due to the commissioners, when the commissioners need to provide feedback on those memos, when the order needs to be sent to the commissioner, the draft order to the commissioners leading up to the meeting. So actually working back from the meeting is I think what the better approach is. And so I'm also envisioning detail around all of that, so that the end goal is essentially a process manual that a new employee can look at, and when they get a filing and they could look at this manual and say, okay, I know when this is due. So I think that would help with making sure that everything stays on track. I think it will help make sure that staff is not overworked and doesn't have to, work over the weekends to send us memos and orders on Mondays or, whenever I think there are a lot of benefits to this. And so maybe working with Ms. Curry, we can figure out what a deadline. I mean, I would prefer to figure out a deadline right here to sort of make sure we're all held accountable. But I think you've seen a draft of it. So maybe, can you think of a reasonable deadline?
Commissioners, yeah, there is a draft. It's circulating for a second draft as we speak. I want to make sure that we're giving staff enough time to be thoughtful about this as they look at the draft and taking into consideration what you've just stated. But I think that we could get you as the point commissioner on this, a draft, I want to say in a month, a healthy draft, one that the staff and I can be proud of presenting to a commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds reasonable to me. And so my preference would be to meet every other week, or every 2 weeks. And I think part of the reason why is because I believe that we need to slow the process down a little bit, so that we all have time to do our part and aren't rushed, right? Because if we're doing everything weekly, it just we're not getting the time that we need. I think at every step, where advisory staff, I think also feels rushed because of the way the process is designed. So I think we could definitely benefit. There are a lot of improvements to slowing the process down a little bit. For example, I think having the memo before the order would be helpful. The memo that we received today, I thought was really good about the Odell complaints. But we ended up with alternate orders because sort of just the way the process is designed, right? There's not enough time for a commissioner to provide advisory staff feedback. And so I think having the memo before and being able to provide feedback will help advisory staff figure out what order they would recommend. So anyway, I think a month is reasonable. So I appreciate you helping with that. I started saying this. I believe that slowing the process down by meeting every other week would be helpful, but I guess the first thing is to make sure that we can do that, right, given our statutory obligations. And I guess I'm curious whether Commissioner Ellison and Chairman, whether you would prefer to see options as to, we could meet every other week. We could meet on Wednesdays. We could meet on Thursdays. This is how the process would look for each one of those. Are you interested in seeing that, or would you prefer the staff just propose one option?
Appreciate that. For me, more important maybe than options of weekly or bi-weekly will be a little bit of context around how making a change improves the process. Because what I'm seeing now is we've got a dedicated group of folks working very hard on this weekly cadence, but they're all in the same cadence, right? So things like getting memos in advance, it feels like maybe we need an advanced team and then a week, a week of the meeting team. So the advanced team is getting memos to us 2 weeks before the meeting. So then we have opportunity to provide input or guidance on orders before they get drafted. What I don't know is that a capacity issue? Is that just, if we could have a little bit of input around why things aren't working as well as they need to now versus how a change will create the opportunity for an improvement. That to me is more important than do I pick every week or every 2 weeks.
And I guess I just will say I'm certainly in favor of, any process change that, helps us, feel like we're slowing things down a bit and having a bit more time to deliberate and investigate prior to an open meeting. And I'm happy for everyone to come up with sort of their top recommendation as to how they see things flowing. I'm still a little concerned about if we go to bi-weekly, that we'll have these sessions less frequently where we're communicating with each other, but maybe there's some workaround where, we could have, on the off week, a closed deliberative session, for example, where, we would be able to discuss things, but we, wouldn't vote on them until the meeting, or, maybe there are some options there that allow us to, have some weekly discussions, yet vote on matters on a less frequent basis.
Are you talking, it sounds to me like maybe you're talking about the communications with commissioners item on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess I was just assuming we would do those every 2 weeks, but I see your point. Another thing to consider.
Just another factor to consider.
And then the other part of the process that maybe I don't need that. I could just explain to you offline. I'm just sort of giving out all my ideas, but I think accountability is very important, meeting deadlines. And I think that goes for everybody. I think whenever I think staff should feel free to request edits by a certain time that's reasonable, right? And the commissioners should meet that deadline, because that is how the process is going to work. If staff sends us something, a memo, and they don't give it, or they give us a deadline and then we miss it, the process kind of breaks down. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I think we made that observation at a previous meeting, that deadlines are valuable. And then they're only valuable to the degree that we all follow. So I agree with you there. Okay, so any other communication items? I mean, I was going to bring up the April 12th meeting, but we've got that covered, I think. No, nothing else. So any objection to adjournment? Well, seeing no objection, we are adjourned.